I call it the simple approach. So I think what I try and be good at is taking life that's messy and complicated and making it simple. So on that, right, Richard Feynman's like, a college professor, I think this comes from him, can teach the same thing in like 20 minutes or 20 weeks, right? But some people have to take 20 weeks. And it's like, you really don't understand it if you can't distill it down to 20 minutes, right? And cut out some other things and get to the high level stuff. So life's really complex. We're distracted by the Kardashians and other nonsense and the Bachelor and whatever's on Netflix, and just every little thing is like a distraction from what really matters.
What's up, everybody? So excited for today's episode. We had a very special guest. His name is Dr. Chris Brown.
Yeah, Professor Brown was my teacher at Dixie State University, and he's been a mentor and friend to me ever since. He talked to us a lot about his why he's in education, what he wants his students to get out of it, and how to compress his life into really good time management. So I know you're going to love today's episode.
Yeah, look out for the simple analogy. It took us the whole episode to go through it. It's amazing.
One acronym took up all the time.
Yeah.
But you guys are going to be well fed. He dropped bombs on us today.
It's for sure worth it.
This episode is brought to you by Big Storage Ventures. We are now inviting you to team up and partner alongside us. We bring our experience hunting storage deals and maximizing the self-storage asset to provide our partners with cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation, all in one recession-resistant asset. Leverage our sister company, Big Ben's Moving Service, to fill your facility and give you an edge over the competition. Reach out to bigstorageventures@gmail.com or DM Big Storage Ventures on Instagram to team up.
I guess I'm like big on atomic habits, so it's got to be like if I'm stepping over a line, like I don't notice any difference. So like if I'm going to save money, I'm saving a penny, or else it's going to be like, because most people start with something that's just like too great. And it's like, I'm going to change the world. They get a dopamine hit of like, I'm going to set this huge goal. They get high hope. And then, it's just not sustainable. So for me, it's just got to start small. So it's like, oh, no brainer. I could do this. And so anything for me that's I'm going to try and make it a habit. It's just, for the most part, it's either reducing friction or adding friction, depending on the habit, if that makes sense. So it's just got to be like, this is super easy to do. I can do it. And so, stupid example, but like, that Atomic Habits book, BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, like he talks about every time he'd go to the bathroom, he would do 2 push-ups, that kind of mentality where it's like, who can't do 2 push-ups? And then, he's down there doing 2. He's like, well, I can do 5. I'm down here and do 10. And he's doing hundreds a day by the end of it. Not because he's going to the bathroom a ton, just because he's doing more per bathroom break. Anyway, so I was like, okay, well, every time I walk into my closet, back when we lived in a house that had a decent sized closet, I said, I'm just going to like do 5 like reps of, like with dumbbells, and then I'm like, well, I'm doing 5. Why don't I just do shoulder press or whatever it's called? not that I'm huge, but like it became sustainable. And then you started to notice a difference, and then it became easier to do 10 and 20. And now it's like a full workout routine.
Nice.
And again, but if it were going to the gym 2 to 3 hours, like that's just not going to happen with my schedule. I've got 6 kids. Like it's got to be fit into my schedule and make it easy. That's me. And I guess too, when we teach entrepreneurship, typically we're talking about like some students are like, dude, I could build this app and I could do all these things. And it's like, you got to find developers. You got to have a lot of money, potentially, maybe find like venture capitalists. Like, is this in your wheelhouse and skill set now?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but probably not. So we just want them to take action and just do it. The quote, like what is the quote? Like if information was the problem, like if lack of information was a problem, we'd all be billionaires with 6-pack abs. Like we know things we should do and we rarely execute on those things.
Well, yeah, the atomic habits you're talking about, that's like the best kept secret in the world. It's just creating a sustainable habit and then doing it. But I think that says a lot about you. You read a book, you get a little bit of knowledge, but the difference with you is that you took action on that knowledge. So you read about the tiny habits, but then you said, okay, well, what can I do in my life? And they're like, well, I'll do bicep curls every time I walk in my closet. And you actually apply. But how many of us, we get the information, the knowledge, it just ends there.
Yeah. So when I teach at Utah Tech, like day one, I have this fear. The fear is, you've heard this example of like the birds that go to flight school. Birds go to flight school. They walk into school. They go to school. They learn how to fly, and then they walk home. It's like, dude, we taught you how to fly. Like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and I worry that I'm going to teach entrepreneurship, and then they're going to go like not do any of it. Like, so what's the point? Like, it just begs the question, like, are we wasting each other's time? So I want them to immediately take action, which is good. That's how it should be. And I think we're used to education where you sit there, call it the bulimic theory of learning, where you just repeat back the answers. You throw it up. There's no nourishment. Is it on the quiz? Is it on the test? And for me, dude, it's like, this applies to life. So let's get a little piece of, you talked about it, massive bias toward action, like imperfect action, I think was your kind of quote or whatever. It's totally that. Like, just take action on the little bit that you know, and you're going to be better off than like learning a ton and taking no action.
Well, and I want to know kind of how you're engaging students on that, and to kind of catch our audience up on how me and Chris got to know each other. I was his student. We just connected the dots that from the first year he moved here, I took one of his classes every single year. And I liked his classes because they weren't hard and they weren't boring, but they actually engaged me a little bit. And I felt like they were kind of the only ones I'm learning from, as far as just what I can go put into practice, right? Because I already kind of, a business already had chose me. I was already starting to do things that I could go and apply. And, you know, I don't get a grade anymore. So now I can say you're my favorite teacher without kissing up.
Sweet.
But, you know, tell us kind of about the struggle of being a teacher of entrepreneurship and getting people engaged.
Yeah, for sure. So it's different because on day one, I walk in and, you know, there's no like, let's review the syllabus. Let's talk about the final exam. Our final exam is a 2-minute pitch where they can win $1,500. Like, it's like, you know, like a Shark Tank style pitch. So that's like the coolest final on the planet. There's no testing center or anything like that. But I get up there and I just say, you know, why are you taking the class? And I am 100% genuinely interested in that answer. Because if there's no purpose or why driving them, it's just like, I know how it is. They go to the other classes and it is like, what's on the final? How do I meet the expectations of the teacher so I get an A and I move on, I get my degree, and hopefully get a job? Like, I don't know. So I ask different questions and I just wait and I want to find out what is their why, what's driving them. Like, are you taking this class? You know, it could just be part of their major. The difference is my class is mostly elective. So like they've chosen to be there. That's not required. So honestly, I think it's asking a lot of good questions and just getting to know them is the idea. So just building trust from day one. I really want them to start a business. It helps that when I was their age, I tell my story. So when I was, 21, I guess more like 23, I came back from living in Mexico for 2 years and I was a full-time business student. So I took 15 to 18 credit hours all day, Tuesday, Thursday, back-to-back classes. And then I worked Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday for 40 hours at 10-hour days at Staples in Orem. Wow. And I went to Utah Valley University. And I was married and we had a kid and I started a business. So that's just my personality. I'm not saying that's great. That's not like an ego-driven statement for me. Plenty of people do way more than that. Some people do way less. I'm just always going to fill up my schedule. Mm-hmm. But working full-time, going to school full-time, married with a kid, and I started a business. So I'm like, if I can do it, you can do it. But the other thing is I've learned students who start businesses, they are also like that. They're going to school full-time. They're working. Almost all of them are crazy busy. And so they're not like, oh, I got a lot of money and free time. Maybe I should start a business. Mm-hmm. They're like, I'm super slam. Let's also do a business. Like, so the people that get stuff done. And to me, this was kind of counterintuitive for a while. My wife would, this is a similar story, similar kind of learning, I guess, is my wife would volunteer at schools and she's like, yeah, I'm going to school to volunteer and not get paid. And that's fine. You can go volunteer. But I'm like, why aren't other people doing it? And she's like, well, everyone there has a lot of kids as well. And they're all really busy. So even then, right, it's like the quote of if you want to get something done, ask a busy person.
I was just going to say it. Yeah, I'm glad you said it.
yeah, so that was the takeaway. Is like busy people by definition get stuff done.
Yes.
You could be busy spinning your wheels, right? And it's not productive. But I think most of them hopefully try and figure out, is this productive or not, if they're crazy busy anyway.
Well, and if something comes up that's important enough and you're a busy person, you can make the other cogs in your machine more efficient to clear enough room for it, right?
Correct. So that's a great like learning, because we talk about the size of your plate, right? Like it used to be, I don't know, 60 years ago, like I don't know the exact dimensions, but I think they were like 9-inch plates, literally plates that we put our food on, and we filled our plate, right?
Yeah.
Like Parkinson's law, the work will expand to fill the time allotted for it. So we fill that plate. The issue is, once we started getting 11 or 13-inch plates, well, guess what? We still fill those up, and now we just are obese. So the question is, can I, one, artificially limit the size of the plate, right? Can I time block an activity that might take other people 4 hours, but I'm only going to give it an hour, and it's going to take an hour? So can I share a good story on this?
Yeah,
Hopefully
please.
it's a good story. So I had to give a presentation. I tell all my students this story because I love Parkinson's law, and it helps a lot with productivity. So I had to give 2 presentations to dental hygienists. I work in the dental space a bit. So I was giving them some presentations. I knew Parkinson's law. I knew that I could prepare for months because I had months. But I also knew, like, if I gave myself 1 month or 1 week or 1 day or 1 hour, that's how long it would take. So I said, I'm going to go in the morning of the presentation, 1 hour before the presentation, and knock it all out. Okay, so that's all well and good. I said I had to give 2 presentations. What I was doing was preparing for the afternoon presentation for the first 45 minutes, meaning I hadn't done anything for the presentation that was now 15 minutes from now. So it took me 15 minutes, right? But those 15 minutes I was so focused on, like, is this relevant? Is this going to work? Is it irrelevant? Like, is this wasted detail or space? And I removed it, and I was just hyper-focused. So it's like, you know, even then, instead of 3 months, it was going to take me an hour. Well, why wouldn't I just put 15 minutes? Because that's how long it took me. No one knew the difference, and it was a better presentation in some ways, because I wasn't like, this would be nice to have in there. What about this, right? It was just laser focused. So it's the same thing when I was an undergrad, you know, when I was like your guys' age, and I had to study really effectively because I didn't have time not to. Like, it was binary, it was pass or fail, like A or fail, because I worked all the time.
Yeah.
So it just laser focused you on, like, what's vital, what's not. I think the other one, I know I'm just kind of going off here.
Please, yeah.
So I was listening to this talk, and the guy he was kind of pushing a dude around in the wheelchair who couldn't do anything. He couldn't move his arms or legs anymore. He was just so old. And he's like, dude, he was asking him, like, you used to, you know, compete in all these sports. And he was a pretty high level, like, athlete. He's like, now you can't really do anything for yourself. How do you deal with that? And his answer was something like, when you can't do anything, you only do what's important. Like, when you can't do everything, you only do what's really, really important at that point. And so it just laser focuses you, I think. That was my takeaway.
Thank you. Yeah. And I want to kind of take what you just said and kind of apply it to your life. Like you just said, you're only going to do what's important to you if you limit your time, right? And so with you, I mean, we talked about some of the things you're juggling off air, and your day surprised me how many different hats you wear in a day. I want to ask first, you know, why do you allocate what you talked about, you know, trying to get your students to dig for their why, but what's your why? Why did you, you know, allocate some of your time as an entrepreneur to being a professor?
Right. And it's been that kind of consistently over time. So I did the undergrad thing, started the business, right?
Yeah.
So I got a bachelor's degree, started a business.
What was the business?
So we made screen protectors for back then, like PDAs, like modern day smartphones. So we started that, and then we sold that, not for a ton of money, but it was a great learning. I took ownership of my education, right? I'd go to an otherwise perhaps not so exciting accounting class, but I had a business, so I'm like, dude, let's apply this to my business.
Yeah.
Once I did that, I was interested, which meant I was also getting a better grade on the test. So it was like a win-win, right? I took ownership of the learning. I didn't really think of it that way back then. And I'm not saying I'm great. I'm telling students, if you're bored, like, that says more about you than the class.
Yeah.
And it's a hard lesson, but it's the idea you don't see the world as it is, but as you are. So if you're unhappy all the time, you're just finding things to be unhappy about, and kind of vice versa anyway.
Yeah.
So it was get the degree, start a business. And then I was like, well, I want to get a master's. So get a master's. And after the master's, I started a business for a while doing like consulting. And then after that, I went to England to start a PhD, which I finished in Australia.
Wow.
And then after that, I went to work in the dental field with a buddy of mine and just started like operating dental practices and growing that. And so then I was like, well, I love teaching, and kind of the core of everything I do to me is teaching and communicating. So I try and just do that well. And I'm super curious. So I like just to explore a lot of different fields. So anyway, got the gig at Utah Tech. And the reason I do both, even though it is very difficult sometimes, because sometimes the summer comes, right? And I'm done teaching for the semester. And it's like, dude, I'm doing well. Like I'm running these businesses. Like I could explode and scale these things.
Yeah.
And again, that may sound like ego driven. I don't know, but it's
we
like,
brag on here. It's okay.
Well, all I'm really saying is I have more time, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm not teaching in the classroom, which also doesn't take a lot of time, but I got big classes and grading is something,
time.
but it's time for sure.
Yes.
And it's, context switching and other things. But during the summers, it's like, why do I could just do this all the time. And I have pure, like total flexibility over my schedule during the summer. Whereas, I got to go in and go to meetings and other stuff at Utah Tech, which fine. The reason I do it is I consider it the learning part of my life. So the education, learning, and ways to think out loud. So and I love it. I love the students. And when they tell me I'm making a difference, it's like, that's super validating. And I want to change their lives. I always tell them, like, if I had a syringe that here's all the stupid stuff Chris Brown did, and I can inject it into you, so you didn't do it, I would just give you the shot. But history takes some time. And so I want to get all that knowledge into their head so they don't do all the stupid things I did. And the reason I'm good to the extent that I'm good at anything is because I probably did it every wrong way possible, literally. And so I try and just put that in their heads. Anyway, so I think it makes me a better entrepreneur because I'm kind of teaching. I'm trying to hold myself accountable and not be a hypocrite. So if I say it or teach it, it's because I'm trying to do it. And I say trying to do it, right? So it's here's what I think we should be doing. Here's what textbooks say. Here's my own experiences. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That's kind of why I do it. But
yeah, if I hear you right, you're saying that you do it. It not only is it rewarding because you get to help other people, but it also you get to use your classes almost like an accountability thing. Like I'm preaching this and I'm gonna apply it in my business.
Yeah,
I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, I hope so. And I do love Utah Tech. It's been good, and I love the academic side. I love the mind, all of the intellectual stuff. But if you're just doing one or the other, I like the bridging the gap.
Well, I think you are a good bridge because there's a weird between entrepreneurship and then education. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that when it's like going to school and then someone called it in our last podcast a drone. So a ton of people go to school to become drones for their businesses. And but yet you got your PhD, right? And gone all the way, and which congratulations, by the way. It's a huge
thanks.
accomplishment.
Thanks.
But yet you're on the entrepreneurship side. So what are your thoughts on that with education and business?
Yeah, lots of thoughts there. The first thing that comes to mind is my first day at Utah Tech when it was Dixie State. So I walked in. Man, it's a crazy story. So we left Texas to come here. And that's about probably you might have been in one of those.
I might have met you that first day, honestly. I remember you telling me you recently moved from Texas.
Okay, yeah.
So
well, not everyone knew the backstory. So we had come from a business breakup, moved into a hotel. My wife was 8 months pregnant. We were living in a hotel with nowhere to live because it was really hard to find a rental that we could fit 5 kids at the time plus us. She's 8 months pregnant, had just had her appendix out, and we're in a hotel. A hotel where one of my kids ate a pink pill under the bed, and we had to take him.
Oh my gosh!
Or she was 2, so we didn't know, or whatever age, and so we went to the ER. It was just a crazy time, and so I got the job at Utah Tech, which pays I was an adjunct. I was teaching one class on day one, so that wasn't going to cut it, financially. And we're trying to build a business at the same time. So we hit reset from Texas, came here, said we want to live here. Let's build a business and do that. And then got the one class teaching entrepreneurship, which was a blast. So day one, I think the class was around probably 9:00 or something in the morning. It was an earlier class. And a student walks in, super good student, but I didn't know him. Literally, day one, first student. He says, "Do you own your own business? Because if not, this is going to be a waste of my time." And he didn't say it with a smile like I
Can you say who that is? That's pretty bold.
It was Alan something or other. I'd have to look him up. It was
Alan.
back like 7 or 8 years ago.
Pretty bold, Alan.
But cool too.
But super cool. I was like, this is the kind of students I want in my class. Like, I want assertive students who are going to challenge me. And I've learned that the entrepreneurship students, at least the ones who care, they will smell blood. Like if you're not legit, in my opinion, not saying I'm legit, but if you're not trying to do it and run a business or have no experience, I think that's probably true across all the majors, right? Like they'll smell blood and they either just won't participate because they don't trust you, or they'll eat you alive. And so I would like that. I encourage that. Luckily, I had a business, and we were trying to grow it, but I wasn't making any money at the time. We were just paying employees to kind of keep it stable. And then we just grew from there, and it's been great. So we were living in a 3-bedroom townhome after the hotel. That was the solution at the time.
Some bunk beds.
Oh yeah, bunk beds for the kids. My office was there, and we've just built up, scaled multiple businesses because of that education and the know-how and the drive and the other things. And now it's great, and I have multiple offices across town I can go to. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
Which sounds super arrogant, but it's like we started in a 3-bedroom townhome with 8 of us, by the way, and I worked out of that bedroom. So times were kind of crazy back then. Anyway, your question, though, was how do I
Where's
make
the
sense of
disconnect?
both there?
Yeah, because entrepreneurs, it's like education's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Or like formal education, not education. That's
correct.
I didn't mean that, because we have so much knowledge and information, and we need to better ourselves, increase our knowledge.
Correct.
But we were thinking like institutional degrees and things like that.
No, I totally got
For
you.
the same reason that that one student came in, like, this is a waste of my time.
Right.
Like, unless you're like applying this, like the thought is, why would I go and learn from a textbook? If I want to go into business, and that business can teach me every skill, I can learn the lessons I need to learn in the field. And so why would I need to go to school?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's a question I ask my students on day one too. I say, why are you guys here? Because if you're taking out a loan to come to class, right? That's debt right there. You probably don't know what the interest rate is, but that's going to affect your future earnings or cash flow. 2, there's the opportunity cost of you could be working right now, right?
That's true.
So not only are you going into debt by sitting here, but you are, potentially not making money right now. So I ask them all the hard questions, for one, to hold them accountable, to be like, you need to take ownership of this. And I think you guys would agree, like, the number one asset, right, is our mind. The number one thing we can invest in with the highest ROI is our education. If you watch like Alex Hormozy, he's always that. Like, people who, I was just listening to Robert from Shark Tank, and I'll answer your question here still. But Robert was just saying, like, when he was like 22, he had like no money. He found this course, and the course was super generic, like how to make your life better title or something. And it was $300. And he's like, I told my friends, I'm like, we don't know what the heck we're doing. Let's go take this course. And he's like, I'm the only one that took it and did it. And like, it changed my life. So investing 300 or maybe even 300,000, depending on your level, like, is totally worth it if the return's there.
Right.
The Mark Twain quote I always tell them is, don't let the degree get in the way of your education. Right?
That's really key too.
It's key, because if I ask them usually, like, if you could pay me whatever you're paying over 4 years and I hand you a piece of paper as your degree, how many of you would do it now? What would you guys guess?
50%.
Yeah, it's 50 that raise their hand, so it's probably even higher.
Just want the paper.
It's just a like a dark alley transaction of like, give me the money, I'll give you the degree. Like, because they want the degree to get the better job, whereas I'm trying to teach them education's cool. Learning is cool. Like, not learning makes you dumb. So I want them, the main thing is obsess over education, like love it, be curious, like it'll make you a lot of money. The problem is they come out of school, high school, just regurgitating nonsense, reading. I see it because I have teenagers. They read books that they don't want to read. So reading now becomes stupid and boring. And why would I ever read? Because I hate reading. So don't read stuff you hate reading, like read whatever. But they have to read stuff in high school, right? So I think they're taught that school equals education, which equals boring. And school equals boring sometimes, but education shouldn't, definitely not.
Right. Well, I want to just pause here too, because I'm actually having this conversation with my little brother, right? He was going to college, he started a business, and I'm looking at it, and a lot of times I tell him, like, look, if you're just going to go, like, you can prove to yourself that you're a finisher doing other stuff. Like, you can do harder things than college. Right. So go if you're going to get like a technical degree, like finance, accounting, be a doctor, lawyer, or go if you're going to actually go and take the entrepreneurship classes, but don't go just to get the degree. Right.
Right.
And I think the challenge is that such a high percentage of the curriculum to get my degree, I don't use, or I was not happy taking. Right. And so there's that 10 or 15% that you really have to suffer through 85% of the curriculum to get that 15 or 10% that you actually are fascinated by and are going to go apply. I think it's a big dilemma.
Yeah, it's a big dilemma. Mark Cuban says, like, you don't go to college to learn what to learn, but how to learn. So I think that might be true of anything. Like, you read a book, right? And for me, I look for one, like, golden thing that's like, dude, that's the thing. Or a speaker. They might otherwise be boring, but I'm not writing down what they say. I'm writing down the thoughts that, like, you know, that are triggered by what they're saying. Yeah. So I can always find something. And I'm saying kind of cliche sayings, but when the learner is ready, the teacher will appear. And when the learner is truly ready, the teacher will disappear, because they're now self-taught and learning on their own.
That's a good saying.
But if you can learn from everyone, like, dude, you're learning from everyone, like, versus like, oh, I can't learn if you're boring or whatever. So anyway, I guess my main point is, like, you may go through and only find one thing the whole semester, but that thing could be worth, like, its weight in gold. Like,
yes.
So 10 to 15%, I would love it to be 100%, but maybe that's a decent ratio.
I'm not talking about your class. I'm talking about.
No, I know, overall.
Your class is the 10 to 15%, but
my class is unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a couple of things. Like, it was my very first semester, Larry S.I.M.P.L.E. So he's not teaching anymore, but Dr. Derek S.I.M.P.L.E.'s dad.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was teaching one of the intro classes to school, and that's what I quoted him earlier when he sat every single student down, and he's like, he asked why you guys are here. He said, and he's like, why are you guys getting a degree? He's like, you realize that every single job that you could get after this, they could teach you everything they need you to do, like all the skills. And like, so we went all over these scenarios, and he told everyone, like, you should be going to school. You should be learning to become a learner. He says, that's why you should be here, is developing that skill of becoming a learner and problem solving, and be able to do that in the real world, in the future, and how that will take you. But you mentioned, like, taking ownership of your learning, and that class with Larry and a few other people in my life, I decided that I was going to take ownership of my learning when I went to while I was going through school. And it changes everything, because now, am I blaming my teacher because he didn't tell me what was going to be on the test? No, I'm like, why didn't you guys read the book? Like, he gave us, like, I'm thinking like one of our economics classes, like, I'm like, I want to learn economics because maybe it'll help me in my career, maybe help me in the future, maybe help me with the business. Like, I want to learn this stuff. So I'm like reading the book, and then we take the test, and everyone's like, this teacher sucks. He didn't teach me anything. And I'm like, dude, this is great. I had, like, he's talking about the fun stuff, and there's all the other stuff, like, we can read in the book, but I don't mean that. There's way, way better students than me. I'm not trying to be like equal thing either. It's just amazing when someone makes that mindset switch, with their learning, taking that ownership of their learning. And then now school is a tool. Now I'm going to school as a tool. And that's kind of why I switched. I wanted to go into business. I took one of my first classes, an elective. And I can't remember the professor. I'm not going to say his name anyways. But it was like, the class was, the first assignment was like, read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or something. Like, the whole curriculum was going to be based on this book. And I'm like, why in the heck am I here? Like, I'm going to pay to read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like, it was almost like, I was like, this is ridiculous.
Because you could read it on your own.
Because I could do it on my own.
And you should read, everyone should read
Everyone
that book
should read on their own.
like once a year. Yeah, it's a good book.
I should. And I'm like, why would I pay to go to this? I'm like, okay, that's when I made the switch into getting an accounting degree. Because I'm like, well, if I want to go into business, maybe I'll go get an accounting degree. I'll learn the language of business, and that will help me be better prepared as a business owner, as someone who runs a business one day. But as I've said, like on our first episode, once you kind of get you get on a raft down the river when you go through school, and then they kind of like, go work, big four, and and then you kind of get out of the entrepreneurship mindset. And again, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do, to go and do that, but for some, like maybe they have the bug, and for some, they might want to go that route. And so, it's kind of mixing both things. I went down that path that I kind of just fell into, or I walked into, and then you're like now resetting in life, thinking, okay, how do I get back on where I want to be?
Yeah, no, I like it. I think too, like if I were talking to teachers, because you hear some teachers who just say, these students aren't great, like, or can you believe like half of them failed? Like if you had I coach a lot of soccer. If you had a soccer team and they lost half their games, you could blame it on them, or you could say like, you're not a very good coach. Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean half failed? And you're a good teacher? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like there's the other side too.
Team.
That's the principle that underlies all that basically is put the mirror back on yourself, because you're the only one who can control you. I think the data is like we can control at least 40% of us, meaning we've got nature, nurture, we've got genetics, we've got other stuff, but at least 40% or so is within our control, which is way more than controlling any other people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I don't want students to say like, there are kind of teachers who are ineffective to effective. Same with students. But if I were talking to the teachers, I'd say, dude, you got to be a better teacher. Like the principle that underlies all this to me is like, hold the mirror up to yourself and just hold yourself accountable. Kind of like Jocko extreme ownership stuff. Like you got to take ownership.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm great at that, but
Callan's big. He helps me take the extreme ownership. That's a big thing. That's a part of your core identity is taking ownership.
Is that book, because I actually just did an interview for the IMA, so the Institute of Management Accountants, for like a spotlight, and they asked about they asked about like that journey and like passing that exam and like becoming a CMA. And it came from reading that book, because I'm married, I'm working, full time. I'm trying to go to school full time. Like I'm trying to do all this stuff. And it's like, then you start wondering, well, and I'm a bad test taker, and I don't have time to study for it. Like I have all these classes, and I have work, and I have my family. So how am I supposed to study for an exam and take that while I'm going to school? And, Jocko's like, you have to take ownership. You can't make excuses. And it's like, okay. And once I took ownership of that and saying, I can't blame myself that I'm, it's my parents' fault because, they didn't educate me, or I don't have enough money I have to work, and no one can pay for my school, or I said those things. I take ownership for what I can control, that 40%, and set up a plan. And that, changed my life. So yeah, I talk about the book all the time, because we have to, and everything, if we take ownership over our lives and decisions we make, what we can control, and even the mistakes that we make, you will grow and be a better person for it.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting, because we want to do that to ourselves. In my opinion, we should hold ourselves accountable and take extreme ownership. Right? I think we agree. That's great. Those reasons that you mentioned, right, that you're busy, those are all valid though. Those aren't excuses. Like those are real.
Yeah.
But they don't really get you anywhere either. Like unless you're saying, well, I'm a victim of these and I can't change them, and I wish I could get the CMA thing, but there are people busier than you probably doing it. So I'm saying that's a good thing. But what I'm also saying, because I think there's like contraries in everything, and Russell Brunson's good at this too, is like if you have customers, you want to use empathy, right? I want to understand them. I want to empathize with them, but also not blame them. So I wouldn't hold them accountable. Like if you're thinking of like hero's journey, and we buy or hire goods and services in our lives to achieve certain values or ends that we have, right? if I'm talking to customers, I'm not going to say potentially like, well, just man up and figure it out. Like, what the heck are you doing? Like extreme ownership, like get down and give me 20 push-ups. Like every time I hear Jocko speak, it's like, should I be doing push-ups right now? Like a hardcore drill sergeant dude, right? Like Navy SEAL guy. Anyway, but with customers, like if as an entrepreneur, what I'm saying is I want to use empathy. I'm like, hey, it's not your fault. You've just been sold something that didn't get you the end that you were seeking. We have a better product or service. Because human nature is not very willing to take ownership and take responsibility. At least like the natural instinct is always to blame other people.
Yeah. Well, and as a business owner, if you're taking that all the time, so like that's kind of like the principle applied. Something happens with a customer or a job, and that employer or that business owner says, well, I could have done this a little bit more. Like I could have reminded you more, or I could have done so many other steps. And like Jocko's book, it's you take over every single step. It's like, well, maybe I should have fired this employee sooner, or maybe I should have done more training for this employee, or all those things. But when you do that, stuff gets done, and if you keep on making excuses and becoming a victim of things, especially things in your business, it never improves. It never gets better.
Right. It never does. And you just waste time which is, I think,
keep repeating the cycle.
You keep repeating the cycle. And then what you'll also do is just gossip and drama. Like this is to me, like 90% of people's lives walking around as zombies, just like, I have this problem. Can you believe that? And then that's all we're talking about is things we can't control all the time. Right. This is like People Magazine. Like this is all nonsense. This is all like distractions from what we should be doing. And there's only a handful of things to me that we should be focusing on. Everything else is a distraction from that.
I do want to hear what are those handful of things you think we should be focusing on?
Yeah. So before that, I'll answer that. Yes. I have to be an academic and back up and give context and like all the time. But I wanted to just say, to me, this is like connecting Jocko and David Goggins and like Brene Brown, meaning Brene Brown for me is like the vulnerability, courage are like two sides of the same coin or whatever. And my point is if you as a business owner or a coach or any, leader or manager or whatever, if you're not showing vulnerability and taking responsibility, like how do you expect your team to? So if you're blaming any external circumstance, well, then they start doing that. Oh, the ref did this. So I coach soccer and I see if I'm blaming the ref, they're going to blame the ref.
Yeah.
So I've got to say, hey, I messed up. And that is vulnerability, but that's also courage. But I think the instinct is to be like, I've got to show strength and I don't make mistakes. If I don't show that I make mistakes and I accept those and it's my bad, like how are they going to own their own experience and mistakes as players? Or as, team members. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I would need to model that behavior. I just think that's counter to what we think leadership is.
So are you saying that you kind of have to balance like the toughness on yourself and the empathy for other people, right? Is that kind of...
I'm kind of saying that, but I need to model that ownership in a way that isn't all strength, like perceived strength. It's showing my weakness is kind of that ownership of like, I messed up.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's courage though. But I think sometimes we don't want to, if I want my players and when I coach soccer to say, man, I messed up on that play, then I've got to show that I mess up as a coach. Like that seems obvious to me. I just don't see it modeled that often is what I'm saying. But to me, that's the extreme ownership mentality because Jocko's great on it and hardcore on it. And he's right on it for me. But I like combining that with a kind of Brene Brown is like showing vulnerability is courage and is extreme ownership. I just think it doesn't always look like what we think it'll look like, if that makes sense. Take me back to your question, though.
Yeah, well, I like that. And I like how you say that we don't really get that as far as like leadership. We see so much all strength and we're not teaching that or it's not being talked about enough.
Yeah, think of our like leaders, quote unquote leaders at the highest level politically, right? Like all it is like, I did this right, everyone likes it, and you're an idiot. And then vice versa. Like that's modeled at the highest level, and we want people to watch political debates. Like that's just, my 2-year-olds couldn't do that. Like that's not a high level debate. That's like, you're bad, I'm good. Any questions? Like
funny we got back to that though at the highest level. I mean,
What do you mean?
I'm just saying that it's funny that that's how presidential debates go, and I wonder if they've always been like that, or I'm sure it's picked up a little bit in the last couple of years.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's just become very black and white to me. It's just like, you're good, I'm good, you're bad, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I need your question
Well,
reminder.
your question is, you said people should be focusing on,
Only a couple things.
a couple.
Oh,
Really
yeah, a
important
couple things.
And so I figured there might be a list of really important things in your life that you focus on.
Yeah, and I asked you to repeat that question, and I'm also going to follow
Go.
up on something that I should have said before,
Got it.
because, and then I'll come back
Teaser.
to that.
Teaser.
Yeah, just stick
No,
with
I
us
like
here. 2
Stay
hours to
tuned
go.
after the commercial.
That's right.
I love it.
Yeah,
This is
give
like,
me your email and I'll pay for it. and
this
I'll
is
give
how
you the answer.
like my mind works the same way. It's just like,
Well, it was just, you asked a good question about the kids taking classes and like, well, how do we combine that with like they should take action and it's almost like a theory versus practice. And people
Yes.
are like, well, it works, theory's good in theory, but not so good in practice. Like the best theory is based on practice. So I want to destroy that argument to some extent. Like good theory, good principles, heuristics, rules of thumb can take you a long way because you're taking general and applying it to specific. It's easier to live your life, rather than if in this specific scenario, then you do this, like a principle from 7 Habits would be begin with the end in mind and work backwards. So if you want to make this amount of money, well, how are you going to get there, right? If you want this free time, how are you going to organize your schedule that way, whatever it is. And then it becomes almost impossible not to achieve that goal if you begin with the end in mind. So I'm saying, to me, there's a huge value to those, to theory, to the education side. We don't use textbooks in my class, but even if I made the case that textbooks are useful or whatever, I've seen business owners who are kind of anti-degree or anti-college, and they're like, dude, yeah, I could, like the textbook's not going to help me because it's all practice and it's cool to read about it, but that doesn't apply in real life. Well, the best ones are based on real life. So I've seen, entrepreneurs who kind of almost despise that kind of education. And I get that. I'm walking that fine line.
yes, you are.
But I've seen them almost arrogantly dismiss it as not just anti-college, but almost anti-education, of like none of that can apply. So it's at their peril, and they're going to be naive and ignorant if they aren't obsessed with education, if that makes sense. And I also think people will probably make a straw man out of college education in terms of they're going to relate to it as when they went to school versus how it is now. Like colleges are adapting. I think
changing.
Utah Tech, we are heavy on innovation and entrepreneurship and active learning, active life. So I think, and to me, this is a barbell strategy too, almost, or like these students who are going here, it's cheap, it's inexpensive. I know I sound like I'm
High
promoting Utah
ROI.
Tech. High ROI. They can work at the same time. They're getting a good education. So unless you're going to Harvard or Stanford or somewhere on the other extreme, I think it's the best deal on the planet. So I love that they're doing this, and most of them are working. Most of them are taking action.
Yes.
So I like that about it. All right.
Thank you, Biff. That's good. Maybe we should take the those in the end, because I have something I want to ask real quick. Never mind. Let's go into the 5 things. Let's go into them.
Well, not 5. I did say handful. So a handful, I guess, would be 5.
I chose 5.
No, I did. And
was
we can
random.
say 5. So this is kind of, I call it the simple approach. So I think what I try and be good at is taking life that's messy and complicated and making it simple. So on that, right, Richard Feynman's like, a college professor, I think this comes from him, can teach the same thing in like 20 minutes or 20 weeks, right? But some people have to take 20 weeks. And it's like, you really don't understand it if you can't distill it down to 20 minutes, right? And cut out some other things and get to the high level stuff. So life's really complex. We're distracted by the Kardashians and other nonsense, and the Bachelor and whatever's on Netflix, and just every little thing is like a distraction from what really matters, right? Can you believe such and such politician did this? It's like, yeah, I can believe it, because that's all they do all day, and they do it with our money. Like, I'm not somewhat cynical about it, but yeah, I expect that.
Yeah.
And I'm not.
You're not surprised anymore.
Not surprised. That's how the world is, but I don't need to see my world as that way. Like the economy that exists is not my economy, right? Whatever weather's going on isn't my weather, if that makes sense. Like we get to create that. I'm kind of going to go off on this for a minute because right in the Bible in Genesis 1, am I making you nervous by starting it with
No,
that?
I love
So,
scriptures.
We're very religious on this. I was going to go spiritual direction earlier, so I'm glad you
So
Bring the Bible.
we've got God creating, right? He's a creator. We're creators. We get to create. And part of creation is physical creation, but it's spiritual creation as well. And we get to make that up in some ways. Some ways it's artificial. We talk about this in one of my entrepreneurship advanced classes, like natural happiness versus synthetic happiness. We get to artificially manufacture that environment, right? And for entrepreneurs, usually if the economy is doing poorly, that's when there's lots of entrepreneurial opportunities I can take advantage of, right? Prices are lower, whatever is going on, the economy, supply and demand's mismatch. So lots of entrepreneurial opportunities, lots of big companies started during the Depression and other times when things weren't so great for the clock in, clock out rat race worker. Anyway, so I believe our goal, entropy exists. We've got to consistently take massive imperfect action to control for like eroding quality, darkness happening, chaos, the deep waters. Like we've got to bring order to that. And that creates that requires consistent daily, like minute by minute effort, or else things go to crap in a way. Like entropy is real. So waste is real, and waste is like what we've got to eliminate and deliver, bring value to the world. And we do that by serving others. So when we get what we want, like that's not really going to make us happy. I even see it with my kids. Like they want this for Christmas, we give it to them and they're happy for 2 seconds. It's when we serve others. I mean, we kind of know that, hopefully instinctively. And from experience, when we serve others, we don't care about our wants anymore. And that takes care of like things that we want when we're just worrying about other people, if that makes sense. So I wanted to go with that because I am taking my simple approach to life, taking all this complexity and getting to the other side of complexity with simple, not simplistic that it doesn't do justice to the complex, but simple that it makes sense of it, deciphers it, gets to what's essential. So we've got in the New Testament, we've got Christ saying the 2 great commandments. What are they?
To love God.
And love your neighbor.
Love God, love your neighbor. Love God how?
With all your heart, mind, and strength.
Good. Heart, mind, and strength.
Don't look at me. You know this.
I thought you were going to...
Finish your scripture.
I didn't want to say it wrong.
No, you're
got
good. I mean, it's heart, mind, and strength. So I kind of take those, and in our personal lives, at least, we're going to apply the heart, mind, and strength. Because I think there are people who think because I do X, I'm religious. Because I go to church, I'm religious. I remember like you guys both served missions. I served a mission. I got this letter from someone in my stake presidency back home. And the quote was like, going to church doesn't make you a spiritual person, just like sitting in a garage doesn't make you a Cadillac or something, right? Just because you go, most of the work happens outside of that.
Yeah.
And this sounds... see how direct I want to be here, but heart, mind, and strength means, right, with my body, my temple, like I've got to take care of myself physically. I can't consider myself, I don't know, and we're all hypocrites, we're all sinners, but to be able to serve God ultimately, it's like I got to take care of my body. That means sleep, eat, exercise. But there are plenty of people who are like, well, I'm good because I go to church or I fulfill this or I do whatever, but they're like crazy overweight. And this is where you may want to cut this part out. But, and I'm not, again, we're all hypocrites, right? We're all striving. Totally get it. Yes. And as long as we're striving, I'm good. It's when you're not striving and you're just complacent that entropy happens, right? The natural state isn't to have muscle. We've got to tear our, whatever to build the muscle. Like we've got to break it down. There's a comedian who makes this joke of like, have you ever, what does he say? Have you ever tried to get fat? He's like, no, you don't have to. You just do nothing, right? It's easy. Like that's the natural state. So anyway, for me, I call it the simple approach, but it's based on those commandments. And I don't mean to make this, Christian or Judeo-Christian. This is true pretty much of any philosophy, major world religion. They usually are heart, mind, and strength type, right? These kind of multiple areas of our lives. But because I wanted an easy way to remember it, we teach it as the simple approach. So the S is the spiritual side. And for some people, spiritual is church. For some people, that's meditating, pondering, going on walks, getting out into nature. Fishing, our purpose, our why, our core values, all of those things for me fall under the spiritual, right? The I is the intellectual. So obviously the studying, the reading, the pondering again, the teaching for me, those sorts of things, podcasts. The M is like the material or the monetary. So all of our resources, and this is like our might in the scripture verse, all the might, all the things that we're in control of, like utilize those, put those towards, in the scripture context, I guess, towards like the kingdom of God.
Consecration.
Consecration style thing.
Yeah.
But what I like about that actually is we talked about extreme ownership. I would say it's more like extreme stewardship, right? We don't actually own
anything.
And I love the Chick-fil-A model where he said, I'm a steward over God's resources. So like, I'm going to be held accountable is what he's saying for, did I make those things better? Did I like multiply and replenish the earth in a good way and deliver value to others? So that would be a good book title, Extreme Stewardship.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's write it.
I think we are right now. So the intellectual, so SI, the M, the monetary, which could be material. Like, so that's our jobs, creating businesses for others. Can I pause now that I'm through 3 of them, and I'll go for the PLE in a minute?
Yes.
So I've heard this this story about the fisherman. You probably heard it, where there's a dude fishing in a small village, and he comes to him and he's like, "So why are you fishing?" He's like, "I love fishing." He's like, "Well, dude, let's create like a business plan. Like, so you're gonna catch these fish, right? We're gonna sell them. We're gonna make some money. Then you can start to buy these boats, right?" Have you heard this?
Oh yeah.
So
very controversial.
I got brand new ears.
Well, good. So it took me a couple of years to kind of see through the metaphor a little bit, but anyway, I like it for a lot of reasons. I usually tell at the beginning of the semester. So you can, buy smaller boats after that, hire some small crews. They can go out and really start to catch a lot of fish. And then you can buy a big cruise ship or whatever, big old fishing boats, hire more people. You could be making a lot of money. What would you do with all that money? Like, you'd have all the time in the world. Right? And he's like, "Well, I'd come here and fish every day," which is what he's already doing. So the idea, what's the point of the story in your minds, by the way?
Well, the person who is telling it is trying to teach that sometimes it's not about if you can just enjoy where you're at, then sometimes you don't have to do all the extra stuff.
Yeah.
That's the original point.
Yeah, I think that's the original point, which is valid to some extent. Like, enjoy what you're doing, appreciate it. I think though, one is in that instance, it's like, well, what would you want, right? What's your passion? And I think bigger than passion is purpose. And so in the one where he builds it up, like, that's about like creating jobs, creating value for other people. Does that make sense? So for a while, I think the point was like, well, why would I go build anything? Because this is what I want. And because
you're going to end up doing the same thing anyways.
Yeah, you're going to do the same thing. So why waste all your time doing all that? Well, I think the point is then it's not about you. It's about a bigger purpose and vision than you. And you're probably going to be, when you run a business, like, you have team members who's like, dude, I'm like, by me having this business, they're feeding their family and paying for their housing. And that's a huge stewardship and responsibility. Like, that's sacred. And how they want that security and all these other things, but you can see them grow and there's intrinsic value there. Like, it's beyond, it's above you, right? It's bigger than you. And the business is bigger than all of us. So anyway.
I want to stay on it though, because this is something we actually, I think the first time I heard this was from you. And I think you just kind of left it at what it was.
Probably.
But we talked about it at I had a mastermind this last month, and we talked about this, and we can glean a lot from it, because you really do need to be happy with where you are. And one thing I would say that's in favor of this is, if I'm going to, the good thing about it is I can pace myself. I can set aside time for family. I can set aside time to play a little bit and do bucket list things. And if I'm someday worth 200 million, instead of 300 million, I can sleep better at night because I have a better legacy, right? So I think that's what you want to take from it is the fisherman is content, and the fisherman realizes that money doesn't buy happiness all the time.
Yeah.
But what he misses is the growth. He's not stretching himself at all.
Yeah.
He's not creating, which you pointed out as the first commandment in Genesis is to be a creator. And so I think you look at it, and I look at it to my life, right? I could just do something like coach basketball or coach football, which would be like my fishing. Like that would make me so happy all the time just to be coaching.
Yeah.
And I would love it. I love competing. I love the sport. But what do I miss out on? I miss out on all the financial freedom. I miss out on, what if he breaks his leg and then his family starves because now he doesn't have his boats and his employees to help? What if he can't, like for me, what if I can't serve a mission later because I can't retire, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah. You really realize that you can poke holes in his metaphor after a while. It's not perfect anymore.
Can I share some thoughts?
Yeah,
Maybe
please.
see what you guys think.
Please.
I mean, I'm thinking about someone trading time now. So let's say they go and get like a super stress-free job, like a good job, and they can come home and spend time with their kids, and they have, vacation and things like that. And what I'm trying to say is they just have no stress. They can just focus on their kids when they come home from work. They go do that. Or you try to build up a business. You're spending hours and hours, 7 days a week. You put everything on pause and you lose your kids, that time, the window. So you're building it up so you can go fishing again. So you're building it up because I want to go fishing with my kids. And then you lost them because you don't have a relationship there. The foundation's broken and now you can't go back.
Yep.
So, is that something that falls into this?
Yeah. So we've had people come speak. Some of them are billionaires who come speak to our classes, and they say basically like, I had to give up the first, 3 to 10 years of my kid's life to do this. And I don't know any of them that have said, hallelujah, that was awesome. I think they say it with regret, right? And regret can last forever. Like discipline like takes time right now, but this is like Jim Rohn quote. I'm a big Jim Rohn fan. But regret can last forever, right? Like, I think that is like we've been sold something false there.
Yes.
I think that's a distraction. I think that is like I think there are all kinds of views there, whether they're false dichotomies or just things that people have said for a long time where I'm just calling BS on it. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be that way.
Maybe a victim, maybe making an excuse to not do it.
Yeah, or maybe they can justify that all day long, right? They can say, well, dude, I'm paying for all this stuff for you. That's why I got to take the call, and that's why I got to work, which is ironic because my son got in the car last night and I was on a call, and he's like, oh, you're on a call again. Like, someone's got to pay for the house. So it's good. Like, I'm confronted by that all the time, and I feel like I've got a lot of time with the kids. Like, I'm invested in their stuff. I'm at almost all their activities. And again, that sounds arrogant, I guess, but like, I'm trying to live that balanced life. And I know that I could make more money if I didn't do some of those things, but those things, what the heck? I'm going to make more money so I can retire later when my knees and back are worse. And even if I'm alive, like I'm in poorer health potentially, and my kids are grown up, like it's gotta be now. Like now's the only time they're young and I can appreciate it. So here's the other thing, right? So Clayton Christensen and How Will You Measure Your Life, he talks about, have you guys read that?
It's his favorite.
Yeah.
So good, right?
Yeah.
And if for those who don't want to read the whole book, like there's a good Harvard Business Review article on that, How Will You Measure Your Life. But I mean, the main takeaway for me was if I go to work and do a job, like I get immediate, like, good job, you did that, or I see results. Whereas kids, it's like 20 years down the road, you, like he says, you put your hands on your hips and you're like, we did a good job. Like that feedback loop is so long, but that's true of anything that's worth investing in. We talked about that hockey stick curve. Everyone's like, the curve's going and it's like, let's give up. And it's like, dude, look, it's going to go. That's true of like, if I eat a donut, I mean, this is classic Atomic Habits. If I eat a donut right now, it feels good now. It tastes good now. It's like super good, like dopamine hit. Working out, like my muscles aren't big overnight. It takes months potentially. Like I've got to love the process and not just the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Got to be process driven. Anyway, so I think that's a big one, is like I can get immediate feedback and money right now if I work harder. Whereas my kids, that's going to be hard. Like that's not easy. It takes years potentially.
It comes to priorities, and I didn't bring it up because even Clayton M. Christensen in that book, How You Measure Your Life, he gives an example about an individual who wanted to start a business. It was his dream to start a business. He goes through all the work and stress to get it going, get it launched, and guess what he gets at the end of the Yellow Brick Road? A divorce.
Yeah.
That's what he got.
Yeah.
So it was like, he just said, it was just one example, right?
Here's the thing. I'll just say real quick, though, when you ask about how it fits in to our fishing metaphor, it really doesn't have to be one or the other, because you have to have the mindset that you're creating a family and a business at the same time. Like it applies and rolls over into so many different things. And here, for me, this might not apply to these billionaires that neglected their families for a little while to get there. For me, I am going to quit my business before I let my family suffer. So if I can set aside that time ahead of time and plan for it, then I'm recharged, right? Like I'm a hard worker, but I'm not a workaholic. Like I am going to put my family first so that I can, when I am working, I don't feel like I'm working. I'm excited about it. And I think Chris is a good example, because if you look at how he spent his time today, he spent probably an hour or two on his cash cow, and the rest of it was on the soccer and the school and the family, like other things that are just intrinsic rewards. But really, he fit his cash cow into just a couple hours. Is that accurate?
What?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And going back to the plates, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think part of that is I time block and make it, and part of it is our capacity to do more increases.
Yeah.
But I think too, like I'm always looking, what can I delegate? What can I eliminate? What can I automate? So it's like, how can I make this a process that I like outsource? So because I love learning.
Brody
and
Fawcett.
yeah, I don't want to learn the same thing and do it over and over. Like that's the hamster wheel. Like that's the clock in, clock out. So I want to learn it. Cool. I learned a lot. Have someone else do the repeated tasks. And there are some of those that we have to do. But anyway, that's kind of the idea there.
Well, I like what you said. Others, I think that's an important distinction. Like having someone who's a workaholic, you don't have to be rich or pursuing a business to be a workaholic and neglect your family. You could, and it could be other hobbies too. So I think if you have that mindset of prioritizing them and having good quality time, I think it was David that we had a couple weeks ago that we were asked a similar question about kind of like work-life balance. And he's like, it's not like a pendulum where you give 50% of your time to your family and 50% of time to work. It doesn't work like that. Because like if you will set up, because in the concrete business, he works, all night. They have to do things at night, and then he's working all day to get stuff ready for the next night. But he said Fridays, it's like come Friday at 3:30, I'm blasting Rebecca Black's It's Friday. The whole drive home, I get home, my kids know it's coming, the neighbors know it's coming, we're dancing to It's Friday, and then we watch a movie and have pizza. He's like, we do that every Friday.
Yeah.
And they love it. It's a memory. It's a tradition. It's a tradition. It's like, but he might go work on Saturday. But anyways, just an insight to the conversation.
No, I think it's great, because I think the idea there too is like be present where you're present. And I think most of us live like either in the past or the future. The past is usually just depression, like, oh man, the past I did this, or this could have been, and future is like anxiety, like, or something. And living right now is the only place like life happens. There's this good Seneca quote of like, death is in the past, not in the future. Like we can't go back. We can reframe it and rewrite the history actually, which is super cool. Like we can time travel, and we do that and reconceptualize events and whatnot and learn from them. Define things that maybe were bad in the past as actually good, and different things anyway. But I love that. But living in the present, meaning he's also optimizing, in my opinion, for when he's with his kids, he doesn't do work. And when he's doing work, he's doing work. That sounds super obvious and maybe trivial, But I think sometimes we just try and multitask and do a bunch of stuff. Whereas like Cal Newport's idea of like deep work, if I can do in 3 hours what it takes 8 hours or more for people to do because they're having other conversations or they're checking social media, like I'd rather work 3 hours and then do nothing after or do whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I also know I'm kind of wired biologically or evolutionarily to like work 3 hours. My father-in-law gives this example like of the lion at the jungle or the lion in the zoo. So a lion's just chilling out under a tree like all day, right?
Yeah.
And then the meat comes out and that lion's at 100%, like 100%, like up eating like crazy lion moment. But it's not like walking around all the time and then eating. It's just like 0 to 100. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think a lot of us try and same with eating, like maybe pig out when you're going to eat and then like don't eat. I'm not an expert on diet, but it's when
actually that's what I do and it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've got to do the nothing part for a while, maybe. But I think a lot of people are trying to do a lot of things mediocre style.
That's the
That
principle.
makes sense. That's yeah.
Tell us the PLE.
All right,
I'm excited.
cool.
You left us
So-
on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, I know. So the PLE is the physical, right? Again, like strength. So you can pair most of these heart, mind, and strength to spiritual, intellectual, monetary, and physical. So the physical is, and this is like the handful of things in my opinion. So we know how much sleep we should get, right? We know how much exercise. Like that's very measurable stuff. When we go to the doctor, they test for all these things. So like we should be focusing on those. So and there's only, again, a handful of things that we should be doing, like getting the right amount of sleep, exercising, getting some sunshine, basically everything they said, not to do during quarantine, we should do. Anyway, so, open the gyms, right? Go
Yes,
outside.
get sunlight and exercise.
Anyway.
I'm a big Andrew Huberman Lab fan.
Yeah, me too. So, and that's just it, right? Even on the L and the E, by the way, are love and emotional. So I just kind
Just
of
to get that out there. Just
to get that out there.
Just in case we don't get there.
We'll get there because Huberman has one like on gratitude, like gratitude best practices. We know from research that what we think will make us happy, it will often not make us happy, and we get like hedonic adaptation and on the hedonic treadmill. It's like I need more and more. Whereas what really makes us happy is savoring the moment, living now, having good experiences, which often don't cost money. So the spiritual for me probably would be the gratitude, back to the S of the simple. So the physical one, then the love. This is the second commandment, right? Love your what?
Neighbor.
As yourself.
So I don't know about you, but for me, it was a while ago where I heard the talk that was just like, we've got to love ourselves. Like we've got to put the oxygen mask on ourselves first before we can help anyone else. So love your neighbor, cool, but as yourself. So you can't be like, it can't be a win-lose, like I'm the martyr. We're both going to win. Like this is 7 habits, like seek win-win.
Yeah.
So I put it as the love and the emotional, right? Love yourself kind of idea. And then the emotional is just, it conveniently fits the E because I wanted to spell simple, but it's basically, for me, that is persuasion techniques, right? Empathy, which is a huge one, just understanding where people are coming from, even if you don't agree with them, because that'll help you kind of conceptualize your own worldview and paradigms. So anyway, that's the simple approach. What do you guys think?
I like it. I a little takeaway, like I think when we talk about the first and great commandment is love God and love your neighbor, you finish the scripture as you love yourself, right? And I think I typically don't think of that scripture that way, but you almost have to, it kind of connects with a lot of points we've been talking about today. You almost have to take care of yourself before you can help other people too, which is interesting. And I think a lot of us maybe get, wear our busyness as a badge, or we self-sabotage, right? Or we do certain things that really aren't benefiting others or God even, and we do it to ourselves maybe subconsciously. So I think it's another takeaway I got.
I think that's a huge one that I'm getting from you, because it's almost like people hate themselves then if they're not if they're not loving themselves in the way that they would love their neighbor and love God with all your heart, might, mind, and strength. Justin talks about this. Like he says, you should walk around telling yourself you're awesome all the time, which to like a lot of people would be like, are you just like prideful, arrogant? What? Like you're
Which
awesome?
Justin?
What makes Justin Brinkerhoff?
Okay, it's
Yeah. The other good Justin quote, by the way, is which I think he borrows from someone like I do, from everyone. But
We all do, yeah.
yeah, if you don't, it's not that you don't. If you say like I don't have time to do that, it's not that you don't have time. You just don't have priorities, or like it's not a priority until it becomes a priority. So anyway, so Justin's awesome. So, where was I?
Well, you were saying that.
Oh, the awesome thing.
yes.
Yeah. So to me, like if you let your body go, like if you don't take care of it, or if you like let relationships go, it's almost like you don't love yourself by that definition in the truest way. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely.
maybe, and that probably is a cycle as well, where it's like, oh man, I messed up there, and so
Yeah.
no wonder I'm getting these
And
results.
there is some taboo about money too, right? Like I don't deserve that much money. Like that would be greedy if I tried to make that much money. And I think mostly everybody limits themselves on how much money they can make too.
That is an interesting
yeah.
thought that people go through with money.
For sure.
I want to hear your thoughts on that.
So we just had this class yesterday, or maybe it was Tuesday, when we talk about Naval Ravikant and kind of how he talks about wealth versus riches. And right, it's not a money thing for me, as a wealth thing. You could make a lot of money, you could work twice as much, right? Twice as hard. Jim Rohn's big on this. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a hard worker and sincere. You've got to work smarter.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett's thing, like, if your vehicle to make a lot of money is working at McDonald's or any fast food, like that vehicle is not going to be as good as like owning your own business. You can work harder, but your vehicle's McDonald's. Like, right? I could work half as hard, but if my vehicle is owning multiple businesses, like that's way smarter, and I'm more likely to make more money and get my time back. So I guess my view is wealth is having control over your time, because that's the thing we don't get back. You can lose all your money, get twice as much back. But that time, to me, like, so entrepreneurs who are running, and it's like, I got to hustle and grind, right? Which is very like sexy with entrepreneurs, like just grind it out, like figure it out. Like, I would rather work smart, lazy. And so there's an upside to smart, lazy, which is, if I'm lazy, well, I'm going to figure out how to solve the problem once instead of like keep solving the same problem, like, which isn't an ultimate solution, if that makes sense. And I think that actually comes from being a good student and figuring out some workarounds and learning efficiencies. Anyway, but definitely for me, people always misquote the Bible of like, money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money, just like the love of anything over God would be evil. So money's a good facilitator. If you're a freaking jerk, then you'll probably be a bigger jerk when you have a lot of money. So it'll just amplify whatever is kind of the view.
I like that.
That's
and
my thought.
Just something you mentioned, I guess, speaking of Justin, he listened to the podcast a little bit ago, and we ran into each other at Summit, and he said maybe you should talk about some of the negative things or the hard things that entrepreneurs, instead of the good things, and just kind of make full circle, because you were talking, we were talking about the sympathy from what's her name, and then
Brene Brown.
So Brene Brown and Jocko. So the being vulnerable, and it's harder to do on a podcast too, to be vulnerable and to talk about those mistakes. And I don't want to kind of divert, but it's something that's on my mind before we close. You mentioned, losing everything in Texas. I don't know if that's something that you'd want to maybe share, or if there's something else that maybe you could share, some of the harder things or some of the negative things about entrepreneurship that people don't talk about a lot.
Yeah. So
for Justin, this is for Justin.
Justin only.
Their common friend.
Yeah. So to me, like the David Goggins, you can't hurt me approach, the Brene Brown being vulnerable. Like, if you are willing to expose all your weaknesses, like, and someone can't come to you and be like, dude, I heard you did this. And then you're like, your natural response would be like, wait, what? People found out? Like, but if you're willing to tell them like, yeah, look, I'm an idiot. I did a ton of stupid stuff, and yet I'm still okay, and I'm making progress.
Yes.
Like, no one can really hurt you under that scenario. If you're willing to hold yourself accountable and look in the mirror and be like, I messed up. Does that make sense? So
it's powerful, because no one, you're like you said, no one can hurt you. Whereas if you don't take that approach, people can hurt you really bad.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it helped, going back to Alan, that student who said, like, do you own your own business? Because if you don't, this will be a waste of my time. I was able to say, even from then, like, yes, I own my own business. We're paying our only employee, like, all of our revenue just to stay afloat. We moved into a hotel. That's where we were living. And I was teaching entrepreneurship. Like, who am I to teach entrepreneurship, right? I had the academic credentials and the PhD, and I studied entrepreneurship, and I had started some other businesses. But you could always ask that question, like, who am I? I'm not Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, all divorced, right? Look at all of the people. Like, take the simple approach and the well-rounded approach, the people we study. And I'm not trying to, like, I want to learn everything I can from those guys, and I respect them in a lot of ways. But I'm not going to look to them for maybe relationship advice or something else. So I'm just saying those people that we often like hold up are not living. If we saw every aspect of their life, we wouldn't be like, dude, I want to
choose it.
Yeah. And there's like survivorship bias in there. We study people who are successful, and then it's like, well, what did they do? Oh, well, they got divorced 3 times, had kids with their secretary and named one a weird name. And like, let's do that. That'll make us successful. Like, we just have to be careful, which is why I think education is useful to figure out the correlation, causation kind of stuff. And like, what are principles that we can hold on to that work for us versus what did they just happen to do? And there's multiple ways to success. Anyway, so that was a hard time. Like, everyone asked the question, like, what are you doing? Like, we had a house in Texas when we moved here that was not sold. And my dad, and it was on an acre. Like, properties are a lot cheaper there. But like, we had a nice big house on an acre. We were making good money. Our income went to 0 overnight. We moved into a hotel. I was waiting on a tax return just to like survive, just have a little more oxygen. And that was kind of like I was talking to you before. Some people would be paralyzed by that. Man, I had clarity. I had extreme clarity about my next action.
The sequel to our book.
Yes. Extreme clarity.
Clarity after stewardship.
This is great. Now we just have to write them.
AI can do it.
Yeah. ChatGPT will take care of that.
Yes.
So, by the way, in my classes, I asked students on day 1 of this semester, how many of you have heard of ChatGPT? It was about 4 out of 60.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, don't tell them. They'll do it for all their assignments.
Oh, no, we use it in class. So I had
You encourage them to do it.
For sure.
Brilliant.
Wow.
Dude,
cool.
If I ban that stuff, like, I'm an idiot. It's like saying we can't use calculators, which people do say, I guess, in high school. I don't know.
Interesting.
So we had a group stand up, and I'll come back to your questions. So we had a group stand up and do their elevator pitch, so the 30-second pitch. They discuss problem, market, and unique value proposition. And then I'm like, where's your data? You're missing this. So we plug it into ChatGPT. Hey, I need problem, market, UVMP for this industry. And it was just like, and it needs to be 30 seconds. And it was ridiculous. It beat all of us. That was like the 3rd or 4th time this week where I had other people putting together some different things for other stuff. And we asked ChatGPT, and it just blew us out of the water. Like, it was crazy. Wow. So I make the joke of like, just trust the AI. It'll lead you to the life and salvation. Like, it's not true, but, and I know the Bing thing. I know there's some dangers. So anyway, but I want to be the educator who's like, dude, let's use this stuff. Leverage
really
this stuff.
Cool. Because again, it shows just the difference, in your class and in your belief and in the future and with the kids. But it's like, why would you want to limit a tool
for sure
that could be used in the future? No, let's how can we build on that? Let's use it. How can we use that and leverage that in our lives and our businesses everywhere?
Yeah.
So like, why do we turn away from that? Like, why do we try to say, oh, no, we got to be doing it with our pencil and paper still?
Well, and I think it's the quote of, you see the world not as it is, but as you are, right? Some people are going to be like, look, ChatGPT does this and it's evil because of this. It could be, just like Instagram could be, or anything, right?
Yeah. And
I am fairly anti like social media and stuff for different reasons, because most people don't use it for the right reasons. But we've talked about it. You got to leverage that thing. You got to have a presence. And I'm also very like Cal Newport of like, you can quit social media and be just fine as well. But I'm on Twitter quite a bit, not really others as much. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, if you take that approach of like, this is negative, it says more about you than the platform almost. It could be that the platform's evil. Could be. But I want to be the educator who's like, dude, let's leverage this in the best way possible.
Use it for good.
Use it for good. So like, yeah, today it was crazy busy, but I wrote like 4 blog posts. By me, I mean ChatGPT.
Nice.
Who I will not give a name or a gender to. Like I need it to be it. It can't become like Susie, right? Like anyway.
Like Alexa, like.
Yeah, it can't be that. Like it can't be a person. Because my kids will say like, what is Google? What does she say? It's like, what? It's not a she. Like, don't treat it like a person. Anyway.
Don't misgender it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
Can't assume gender on here.
Right. Yeah. We don't know. And it can change. So anyway, so dude, I guess for me, like that's tricky. Every day is tricky. Like the problems are there, but I think like I was telling you guys today, I went to a business that I own part of, and it was like falling apart. Like, and there are good reasons why it's falling apart that have nothing to do with me, but that's not going to help me. So I've got to take ownership of it. I've got to show the team members who are left there that I'm going to fix it, because they care. Where I care about a lot about freedom, time freedom, and others, most people care about security and getting their paycheck. And that was the main thing. Like, am I going to get paid? So of course, like I get that. That's where I'm not going to take the extreme ownership in terms of like, dude, don't worry about your pay. Don't trade your time for money. Like, I'm not going to tell them that. I'm going to be like, we'll pay you at the end of the day, because I know they care about security, and that's fine. Anyway, but dude, that's a problem that I've got to solve. And I think what's different though for me is like, I'm going to either solve problems that build my own vision and future, or do that for someone else. And I'd rather do it for me. And I love problem solving. I hate lack of information or like uncertainty, just like everyone else. So I want to reduce the risk and uncertainty. But I guess for me, it's just once I know all the problems, like I'm pretty sure I can problem solve. I remember when we lived in England, like times were tough as well. We had one car. We had 2 kids and 2 girls, and then another girl that was born in England. So a small, they were all like under 6, under 4 for that matter, 4, 2, and a newborn. So crazy small. We had one car, and like the radiator was like half on the car. And I worked about 20, 30 minutes away at a university. So I would drive to work. Literally 15 minutes into that drive, I'd be pouring water into the radiator.
No.
It was so good.
Every time.
Oh, every time. There and back, yeah. Or else it would overheat. And this is in England, where it wasn't crazy hot and it was raining most of the time. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was coming back from work, and I was out of gas, and I had no money, and my card wasn't working. Like, I had a U.S. card that wasn't working. We had no money in our British bank account. And I'm a pretty good problem solver, but I was kind of like, oh, like it was nighttime in the U.S. I couldn't call the card and figure out what was going on there. So like I literally was at a gas station with no money. And this isn't a very good problem solving thing, because all I was doing was like digging under my seats, and I found literally £1 and put that in and got home at least, and then had to solve the other problems. But I think, again, to me, that clarity comes where like I only have one thing to focus on. And so I'm going to be laser focused on that. And if I have too much free time, that's my problem. I need lots to happen so I can know what's noise and what's signal, I guess. Have you guys seen Free Solo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen the other climbing movie with the dude who dies at the end, to give it away?
I
know there's other climbing movies.
I thought you were going to say the one where he lost his finger.
No.
That's a really good one.
I want to know that one. You'll have to tell me that one too. But this dude dies, ironically, not climbing, but in like a avalanche. I don't know.
I think this one's called the Dawn Wall. Anyways.
Okay.
We can
So this one's different. But the point is, this dude has like extreme ADHD or something. And the only time he's like calm, cool, and collected is when he's climbing, which is like, dude, that's the only time I would not be like, don't do that. But I think when they're on that wall, he's like, I'm not distracted. I am just calm and focused on this thing only.
Yes.
So anyway, that's how it works for my psychological built makeup is like, once a lot's going wrong, I'm like, here's the only action I need to take right now.
You're triaging.
I'm triaging. Yes, you mentioned that when you spoke.
That's like,
yes,
that is so important. I think me and you have a lot of different personalities. Like I see us on the opposite end of the spectrum on a lot of stuff, but I think where we come together is we both triage.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big one that is good for entrepreneurship. Another thing I want to say too, just something I've observed about you, is you carry yourself the same way you did when I first met you, and I didn't know everything you were going through. You know, like to me, like
yeah.
I just thought you were like legit business guy. You know, like I thought you had tons of money in the bank, like no issues. Like I thought you were set for life already. You know, and you know, I think it says a lot about you then that you had the confidence to carry yourself with dignity. You didn't panic when you got in a bind. I think there's a bigger story that we won't get into, but like someone did you wrong in Texas and you came here and you carried yourself with pride and you said, this is who I am. And today you're doing a lot better, but you don't carry yourself any differently than you did then. Like you don't put yourself above other people, even though you've come so far. Right. So I want to say that's something I picked up on.
Well, that's good. That's good if it means that I have integrity and like, because that's a big core value for me is just like, don't be slimy, don't be two-faced, don't try and please others because you will not please anyone. But yeah, as long as you're not saying like I was fake or like acting or pretending. Because
I'm saying that you're consistent through every phase of life, right? Like, and I think staying even keeled and not letting yourself get too high or too low. Not that you can never find extreme joy or euphoria, and not that you can never be upset, but you'll get crippled if you get too overconfident or underconfident. And I think that's another big thing is always keeping yourself humble, even through those really good times, and always keeping yourself strong and proud, even through those hard times. So
yeah, I think I'm big into stoicism, so I think that's part of it. Not that I'm the perfect stoic, but I'm big into like just, you know.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but tell me you're big into stoicism, but what is that?
Okay. So, have you read anything by Ryan Holiday? No. So the obstacle is the way, ego is the enemy, stillness is key. Like you got to read some of these books.
I have a long list. Obstacle is the way is top.
So he's modern day like stoic writer. The three big stoics, right, are Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. So you can read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's crazy. Like he wrote that book as his private journal, never thinking people would read it. And so you get like this insight, and he's the emperor of Rome or whatever. Like, but these guys they just do some things that are counterintuitive is what I like about it. So there's like a negative visualization. So there's like a focus on, hey, you could die today. And for most people, they avoid the death conversation. We're really good at avoiding it in the US. And they're like, no, keep a like memento mori in your pocket. So, like death is right here. It could happen anytime. Yeah. And so like, I don't remember if it's it's probably Seneca who says, remember when you kiss your daughter at night to go to bed, that she could just be like in a grave or something crazy. Like I'm butchering the quote, but that sounds morbid and crazy. Except when I do that, like, man, I am fully present when I'm with them, recognizing they may not be here forever. That building the business thing of like, oh, I'll do it for 10 years and then I'll have all this free time because I've earned all this money. That has so many assumptions in it. That's ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like that assumes everyone will be alive then. It'll just, so that is very future focused. And I'm like, I got to do what's right now, right here, right now to take care of the future. But if I'm like, so I guess to me, and Steve Jobs is good when he gave that Stanford address. He's just like realizing like today might be my last day is what changed everything for me. And if I go too many days without realizing that, I probably need a reset. I probably need my true north. Yeah.
Like hopefully God doesn't do that reset for you by giving you a life, like some sort of life-threatening situation, and you can do it yourself.
Yeah, hopefully you naturally reset. But you really never know. So I think that is where it comes down to just daily gratitude practices and things like that. it's what you do. I just read the book, the Spencer Johnson Peaks and Valleys book. He's like, this is kind of a Jim Rohn idea of like, there's seasonality to our lives. When things are bad, they won't always be bad. And when things are good, they won't always be good. So what you do at the peak matters because you got to prepare for the bad times. And what you do in the valley matters because you got to prepare for the good. But also enjoy the good and get through the bad. And I think that for me is like the consistency matters a ton.
Yeah.
But
Well, I think there's similarities to, some of the most successful people. Again, I'm kind of going back to David. He worked for like 3 billionaires, or was it 6?
Yeah, 3 billionaires.
He like worked at a hangar for 3 billionaires. And he's like, these are the lessons I learned from these 3. And they had all these things in common. And we just had a meeting with
Wow.
a builder in town. And in that meeting, he was talking about Jeremy Hafen. So Jeremy Hafen he's now like the president and CEO of Clyde Companies, which is one of Utah's, companies with a B behind the end of it. Billion, I mean.
Yeah, right.
For those who are kidding.
right.
But anyways, he's like Jeremy Hafen, and I had a chance to meet him too. But he's just one of like the best guys, and he says he still drives a Toyota Tundra to this day, like 5 years old, 80,000 miles, still drives a Toyota Tundra. He's like he's such a good guy, even when he has all the others. But I think the point I'm trying to make is just you find these similarities between successful people, and they stay true to who they are.
Right.
And I guess that's not true for everything. We talked about some very successful people that have big mistakes in their lives and may have lost suit, but it's cool to see how some of those things align.
Yeah, to know that it's possible and to have role models out there that do kill it in every area of their life.
Right.
That you don't have to, sell your soul to make money or something. Like, we live in the most like advanced modern times. We live like the kings of old could have never dreamed, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. Just indoor plumbing alone, like crazy. And so to have to say I've got to sacrifice or trade. I mean, we're not living like in the savannah or in the like jungle. Like, food is plenteous and abundant to like at Walmart. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, ideas are everywhere. ChatGPT exists. Like, there's never been a better time to make money than now, and we can do that from our own homes. Like,
well, and one of the big takeaways for me is just like you saying, this gratitude and being grateful even for being in such a great country. Ben's uncle Rob, we just recorded a podcast with him, and he was talking about 2008, between 2008 2011. He was working in big pharma. Everyone was getting fired. And he says left and right, everyone's getting fired. And all his coworkers like, Rob, what are you going to do? Like, you just hear another 1,000 people just got fired. Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, we live in America. Like, we're fine.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think we can go and find another way and get another job? And he's like, we're totally fine. I was really impressed by that. It was really cool to hear Rob. It's just like his mindset is like, we live in an amazing country. Are you kidding me?
yeah, dude. So I know we need to wrap it up. Can I share one more thing? And you can either cut it or not.
No, please do.
this will
Please
be on
do.
the show.
It's just because, like, yesterday, we spend quite a few classes in my advanced class, which wasn't available when you were there, going over what we think makes us happy and what actually makes us happy, right? And so we talk about all these things, and I ask them, what do you think will make you happy? And it's once I graduate, once I make money, once I get married, once I have kids, all future stuff. And the problem is they measure people's happiness and they see like, oh, it's either the same or lower. And we have this miraculous like ability to adapt to circumstances. So you've probably seen the one of like paraplegics 1 year later.
Yeah.
And lottery winners 1 year later, and they're equally happy. There's no way if I asked you which one, would you rather be paraplegic or win the lottery? Everyone would say win the lottery. Yet they're about equally happy after. And they often say they wouldn't trade it. But we have this ability to adapt.
Yeah.
So my point is we bring them, we talk about the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And this is before my time. So this isn't exposing my age as much. Like this is a black and white movie before me. Have you guys seen the movie?
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I haven't.
Okay, you
I'm
gotta watch
ashamed.
it.
I haven't seen it in a long time.
I've had so many
don't
people
quiz
quote
me.
this. John, by the way, quotes this all
The
the time.
movie?
Yeah.
Okay. So It's a Wonderful Life. So I'm going to give away the movie because I watch it at least every year. I mean, it comes on like a million times during Christmas, so you should watch it. It's like
fine.
once a year.
Our audience might not watch black and white, so it's okay.
It comes in color, but the black and white's better, dude. If you don't like, what I like about the younger generation is they like 80s music, and it seems like 90s music, and so they are we're listening to disco at the kids are like, let's listen to disco, like even before me. Meaning, if you said, well, I don't like something before this time, like if you haven't watched 12 Angry Men or Inherit the Wind, these super old movies, again, well before me, like you're like, why would you say I don't want to learn anything from the past? And like, as an entrepreneur, the more we learn about that, the more it explains our current situation, and also we can kind of predict the future. Anyway, so I'm not picking on you, by the way. I'm just saying, like, watch that movie though. So It's a Wonderful Life. He owns a business. He's always basically sacrificing himself for other people, and he's a giver. And his like uncle or whoever he is loses some money, and the business is about to go under, and he's about to go to jail. So his circumstances are horrible. And he's like, and he has kids. He has a wife and kids, and he's like, this is the worst situation I could ever imagine, and he's going to commit suicide. And this angel kind of jumps in the water. He saves the angel, just saving the angel. And the angel says, like, what's your wish or something like that. I'm kind of butchering this movie right now, even though I've seen it a million times.
I'm laser focused on this right now.
Okay, good.
I've never seen it, and I'm glad someone's explaining it to me, because this is actually really good.
Okay, so he basically says, like, I wish I had never been born. And the angel's like, okay, I'll give you've never been born. So he gets to go back into town because he's jumping like off a bridge into water. He gets to go back into town and no one knows him, right? And he's like, what's going on here? And he realizes, like, these people are all like worse off because he was never there to, lend a hand, save them, help them in any way. Such a good movie, dude. Like, I'm gonna get emotional just telling you about it. And it gets better every time you watch it. So, like, that's the other thing. So he realizes life is way worse without him in it. What I like about the movie is at the end, he gets to come back to his old situation. Nothing's changed. He's going to jail. He owes all this money. And he's so happy. And he's like, I don't care. I'm going to jail. Isn't it great? And he's so happy to see everyone. That's the message of the movie. Like, the circumstances don't matter. This is like classic stoicism. The circumstances aren't good or bad unless we make them so. Like, we get to attach our creativity and our meaning to those events, and we better be pretty careful about the meaning we attach to them. But we get to choose that meaning. I'm not saying there's no absolute ethics. I'm not saying things don't matter or everything's made up. I'm not saying that. But a lot of it is, and a lot of it's cultural and social and whatever, political, but we get to make that up. Anyway, I love that because he comes back and he's like, I don't care. It's great. I'm alive. Like, he appreciates the small things. I get to see my kids, like, and it all works out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love it for that.
I think that's a great way to cap it. Just focusing on the here and now, focusing on gratitude, being positive. You can sum up a lot of what we talked about today just with that one classic Christmas movie. So
yeah,
can't thank you enough for being on. Now everyone else that is listening gets a little sneak peek into my 4 years of college. So
yeah.
And more. I've probably learned just as much from you after I graduated as when I was with you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. You're teaching me a ton. So it's been good, man.
It's fun.
I like it.
Thank you so much for being on.
Yep.
Glad we finally got to meet.
Yeah, likewise.
That's another great episode of the Beyond Networth Podcast.